Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of An Unconventional Guide to Success. Scott and I are excited for this season and hope you will truly enjoy our incredible lineup of guests who will share their stories and help us as we continue to explore concepts and discuss real life examples showing that the path isn't linear and that the journey to success is self defined. My name is Linda Misegadis.
And I'm Scott Montgomery.
And we will be your guides. We have our guest here with us, Nick Kittle. Nick is a gifted speaker, thought leader, coach, and facilitator. He's the author of best-selling government innovation book, Sustainability, Building Sustainable Innovation in Government, One Wildly Creative Idea at a Time. And Nick spent about 15 years pioneering in government and was most recently as a chief information officer. He's won 3 National Innovation Awards and founded one of the first 5 government innovation offices in the country, which is really quite impressive because Nick was doing this at a time when innovation really wasn't even the catchphrase. And so today, innovation is definitely more of a catchphrase. We hear it more and more. But when Nick started, he was definitely a trailblazer. But during his government career, Nick directed 17 different divisions and developed over 65 unique or first of their kind pilot projects, all while generating $7.8 million in savings, which for any of us who have worked in government can truly appreciate how big that is. Nick is now an inspirational keynote speaker and trains across the country on adopting or adapting to change, building sustainability, and developing high performance operations. And Nick's also done a few TEDx's as well, so you have to check it out. He has one out there on Life 2.0, which hopefully he'll share a little bit with all of you today. So welcome to the studio with us here today, Nick.
Linda, Scott, thank you for the honor of joining you today. I'm excited to chat with you all. It's going to be fun.
Well, great. Well, we are super excited. Scott, I don't know, should we start out with just an easy question and maybe ask Nick, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
No, I think we should stall on that. And I think we should find out more about his book, Sustainability.
All right.
I've never heard that word before. So let's unpack that just for a minute, if you don't mind, Nick. Sustainability, you wrote a book about it.
I did. For me, Scott, I'm a big fan of sniglets, which are any word that should be in the dictionary but isn't. Sustainability is a word that I trademarked, and I believe in the power of making up your own words.
So. That's awesome. What's the book about?
Yeah, so the book is about how we build, sustainable innovation into local government and what we can do. And basically, it translates well into any large bureaucracy. But the general principles are how we can get creative and how we can become better at implementing. Because the truth is, the creativity is trained out of most of us through the course of our lives. And it's not a highly valued skill. It's highly sought after, though. And then the other part of it is we've got to learn to be better implementers. We've got to go out there and actually make it happen. I imagine many folks in the audience have had the $1 million idea, but they're not millionaires.
Yes, really great.
Because somebody else did it. And that's what we got to get good at, is actually going out and making it happen. So it's how we do both of those things, how we get creative and how we become better at implementing.
Well, that's incredible, and I'm impressed by that. So I'm definitely intrigued, and you're absolutely right. And I think that's the premise of this podcast, is to help people become better implementers. And you charting the path is huge for all of us. So thank you for that. And then now, Linda, if you want to pepper him with some good questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think it's always good. Well, and since I'm in the vein of Scott not sticking to the script, that's okay. That's okay. I love it. That's what makes podcasting fun. So Nick, what would be really great though is that, Scott had a life event that triggered him to write the book, How Did You Get Here? And part of that was the passing of his brother. And that was kind of like a triggering event for him to say, I want to reevaluate some things. You also had a triggering event that really kind of set your life on a completely different course. So would you be willing to share with our audience a little bit about kind of how did you get here and what caused you to take such you took a pretty major turn in your career and the path that you were originally on. So.
I did, Linda, and Scott, sorry to hear about your brother. I lost my younger brother a couple of years ago as well, and it's not easy. It reaffirms and reminds you what it is we're here to do, and the time that we're given is this great gift, right? And that's one of those beautiful spaces, is that we get to honor them through how we show up in this world. Prior to that, though, I also, at 35 years old, I was dead on a table. My
Oh,
heart
wow.
stopped beating for over 20 seconds, and was brought back to life, and I flatlined, and um, and and I'll say this: I immediately ripped off all the stuff and went outside to my car and wrote down everything I can remember about the experience I had in that sort of afterlife experience. But what I like to talk about is the life after experience, and what do you do after you've died?
Right.
And that's why I talk about Life 2.0 and what it is we can do differently, and how I learned to live a different kind of life. And I try and help others. I try and show up genuinely to help others live their best life too, their best life 2.0, actually. And
I like it.
and so in that space, it was incredibly scary, difficult time. There was a lot of sleepless nights. I was an insomniac at the time. I was sleeping 1 to 3 hours a night for a couple of years. And as you can imagine, there's a lot that makes you rethink your life with nothing but like the mocking tick-tock of a distant clock to keep you company, through the dark hours
Yeah.
of the night. And you start to evaluate, where are you? And is this how I want to be remembered? And that was really
Mhm.
the thought that kind of jumped into my head. So I developed something I call the tombstone test to help sort of guide myself through that. What would be written on my
Yeah.
tombstone if I were to die today? And
Amazing.
the answer would have been, he really busted his ass at work. And that's not what I wanted.
Right. Yeah, I know. Isn't that what that's so many of us, right? Is that
Right.
that's how we have, especially those of us who've been around a little bit, we defined our whole world around our jobs, our identity, and in this belief that somehow if we busted our asses every day at work, that was somehow going to mean something. And I mean, I think we all realize doesn't, and we're all replaceable. But in the moment, it doesn't feel that way. And it's like, that's how we're defining ourselves.
There's so much that's been used to reinforce that mentality of the hustle culture inside of all of us, especially, I'll say, of certain generations. I was actually in a really interesting discussion to kind of just tie in, and I was in this room, was doing a workshop, and one of the gentlemen was like, this next generation, they just don't want to work. That was his statement. They don't want to work.
Right.
And I said, I want to hit the pause button here. First of all, that's what every generation has said about the generation
Right.
before it, by the way.
Yes.
I'm like, but let me clue you into something else here. Maybe this generation just understands the concept of work-life balance,
Mhm.
and maybe they're not willing to go ahead and just give away all of their life in favor of work. Maybe they actually understand how to achieve work-life balance better than we do.
Yeah.
And that's what's frustrating to you, is that you've been taught hustle culture is the way that we should live, and that's the right way to live life. And in fact, maybe what they recognize through the things that we've taught them as a generation ahead, maybe they
Mhm.
realize that that's not the goal. And maybe all of us going through this pandemic also realized that's not the goal.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't think you can
Right.
roll back work-life balance post-pandemic.
Mm-mm.
People know it exists. Now the only question
Yep.
is, do you have it? And I would
Yes.
imagine most people say no.
Or even how do you integrate it, right? And
Yeah.
so, Nick, not realizing we had so much in common, and I'm sorry about your brother as well. These notions of why we're here for us, I really relate to the word legacy, to what you're suggesting too, right? What are we going to leave behind for the next generation to try and figure out how to build relationships, how to take care of yourself, and how to mitigate that hustle culture that we've been so programmed in our generation to live in. And I really admire what you're saying, because it's so in theme with what we're trying to accomplish in this podcast too. And you're eloquent and you're spot on. So fascinating. I can't wait to unpack more about what Life 2.0 could look like.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so just just to kind of keep things a little light for a minute, I'm gonna go back to my question. If you could live anywhere in the world, Nick, where would it be?
Um, I'll tell you what, I've got 3 places that I love, and Colorado's one of them,
Yeah.
which I'm blessed enough to live in. I got here as soon as I could. I knew I wanted to be here at 14, and I think it's about the best that America has to offer. Now, if you're considering moving to Colorado, it's terrible. I wouldn't
Absolutely.
do
I
it.
totally agree. What everything Nick just said, forget, because Colorado's by far the worst state to live in. So
Yep.
I hear that about Florida too, by the way. I've heard that about Florida. I think they're all flocking to Florida right now. So
Yeah.
Florida's a good place to go,
yes,
right?
Florida's a good place to go.
The other thing is, in my household, we bought land in Costa Rica as well, and so we're really tied into the Costa Rican message, and we really believe what that amazing country has done. And then my favorite place on the planet is actually New Zealand.
Interesting. Okay.
I had the privilege of visiting there, and it's just so much of what I love, uh, all in one place. It's like California meets Colorado on steroids, and it's just fantastic.
Interesting. New
So,
Zealand's on my list. Costa Rica is also one of our favorite places. We actually just got back. We were just in Costa Rica.
oh,
We've been going every year for the last several years. We just were up in Liberia. First time up
okay.
there. Wanted to go and check out a different part, but agree with you. The whole Porta Vida way of life. It's a slower, more appreciative approach to life, and just embracing what is. Not everything isn't about fast pace and where you going and what are you going to do. And so that's fascinating. It's always amazing as you get to have the opportunity to talk with people, to Scott's point, how much you learn about one another and how much you have in common with different individuals.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Thank you for that. So New Zealand's on my bucket list too, though, for sure. But so Nick, if you think a little bit about, like, one of the things that Scott talks about in the book, and one of the things that he and I have focused a lot on, is around relationships and partnerships. And in your, kind of life 2.0 and what you've done with Sustainavation, I would imagine that had to have been a really critical component to how you've been able to go down a path of starting your own business, because being an entrepreneur is such a different mindset than the security of working in a job with an employer. Might be false security, but there is still security in in that. But can you talk a little bit about, the relationship and partnerships and how that's important to you and why those are important?
Yeah, it's such a great point, and and I think it's one of those things that you start to. I mean, for me at least, it was somewhat unintentional, and then it became more intentional, maybe.
Yeah.
So many of the relationships I formed, throughout the early part of the successes of my career were centered around what a concept I call team us, which is that which unites us is greater than that which divides us. And I believe that in my heart. And my philosophy is, what can I do to help you accomplish what you're looking to accomplish? And giving it away for free, and trusting that the universe will allow it to come back to me. And I'm one of those people who, people are like, do you have a contract that we need to sign? No, I'm actually a handshake deal guy, because I believe there's value in that. And if you want to hose me, fine. That'll
Right.
come back to you in the form of karma someday in some other way.
Absolutely.
So for me, it was just recognizing that my greatest purpose is to help others achieve their passion, their purpose. And in terms of giving that away, it created, unintentionally, a lot of sort of deep loyalty,
Mm.
where people turned around and said, how can I help you, Nick? Like, and again, when you're starting out and you write a book and you're stepping out on your own. Literally the same week I got married, I quit my job. How about that one for my wife's got some guts with me,
Yeah,
Poor
she
wife.
does. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
absolutely.
and of course, the in-laws, right?
Right.
Like,
Oh,
what are
yeah.
you
What were
doing,
you
right? Like,
thinking?
What
Yeah,
have you
it's
married
not too
into?
late to annul this. So,
that's right. This is my super unemployed son-in-law, right? So it takes an immense
That's
amount
actually
of
funny.
courage, and you don't always know it. And that's the other part about the entrepreneurial spirit, which is being okay with the unknown is part of the power, or the superpower, that we need to have. And in this space, what we rely on are the relationships that we've built through time, and the way that we've created value for others. And we hope that comes
Yep.
back to us and helps create value for us later. Um, as it turns out, it did in my case. And I'm very blessed, and very appreciative to all the people who have gotten my back and partnered along the way. But early on, there were individuals who were mentors of mine who were willing to step in and recommend me to folks. All of my business, I do not advertise at all. All of my business is word of mouth. It's simply the trust of one government to another government, or one organization to another organization. And that's my entire career at this point has been built off of that. And so it's incredibly valuable. It is how I do my business now, is straight up off relationships.
That's fantastic, Nick. And as a small business owner myself, I have found, and that's why we ended up talking about that in my book and in the podcast series 1, relationships and partnerships are key to the success of that. And you can't thank them, and I know you get that, enough for that word of mouth and the support and the mentoring and the back office conversations that get you through and put that foot in front of the other, that keep you motivated. Have you ever gotten involved in a leadership coach or any kind of coaching service. Have you added any of that to your portfolio of relationships and people? Because I have found that super valuable too. They bring a different perspective, and I wondered if you had any of that too.
So here's where I get a little weird, Scott. But I'll say no. I don't. I don't have leadership coaches that I use. I am asked very regularly, will you be an executive coach and will you do coaching? And I tell people, no, I don't do coaching. I do mentoring because coaching costs money. And I'm not going to ask you to pay me to teach my life wisdom to you. I just want to help you if you're about helping yourself. So I'm usually mentoring
Yeah.
myself between anywhere between 5 and 15 people across the country, depending on in various stages of their work life.
Yep.
But I try and be careful about that concept of coaching because I don't want to pay somebody for their wisdom, and I'm happy to offer
It's
up
not.
mine for free. You know,
Yeah, and mentoring and coaching are two very different things. And I think from a coaching perspective, a leadership coach is trained to hold a conversation of self-discovery.
right?
It's not a mentoring conversation. It's not an imposition of skill. It's not consulting. And so there's a fine line there. And I think oftentimes people do assume coaching is some sort of a consultant mentorship, but really coaching, in the way that I refer to it, is when someone actually holds a structured conversation they've been trained to help you hold, and they walk you through a certain scenario that's a proven study, if you will, on how self discovery can really help you become what you're talking you already are, which is fascinating.
Yep.
So for me, coaching really was a value add. And then I also had my mentors, and I also paid for consultants. So it's amazing. And it's wonderful that you want to give away what you've experienced. And I feel that as well. I think that's really important that we pay it forward for the next generation. So I just wondered if you had that experience. And
Well,
yeah,
so
yeah.
Scott, I'm actually, interestingly enough, I was invited to a men's group that are all men's leadership coaches because the space is predominantly dominated by women. And so it's a men's life coaching group, and I'm the only non-life coach member of this. But they're constantly practicing their skills on me, so it's really fun
Yeah,
because you
yeah.
know, Nick, have you explored perhaps the frame? And it's like I haven't. Sounds good, boys. So I'll say that I have many great life coaches that I'm friends with that are also people who I've had the chance to interact with and see how
Yeah,
they create this value and show up. And I'll say this, all incredibly genuine, incredibly excellent coaches, just not a
yeah,
direct experience that I've had outside of that,
yeah,
which is fascinating.
yeah.
Oh, I think that's
Well,
great.
give me the number because I'm looking for any kind of life coach I can
Yeah.
get my hands on. So if you could make sure after this we connect.
Absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
Nick, along those same lines, of that kind of makes me think about then, for as you were talking about the relationship and the partnership and the people that you met along the way and who have helped you, one of the things that I think is always interesting, especially maybe to the younger generation, is there's this belief that there's sincerity and genuine relationships through social media platforms, and I'm a big believer that they are not genuine relationships. They are just people, right, that you're connected to. Now, I definitely believe in the power of social media, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your thought around more of that genuine connection, that genuine relationship partnership, and how you have to make those. Because I think that that's part of what happens so much these days with this whole social media influencer and this, we're going to make money by telling everybody to wear this shirt or to do this sorts of things, and that when you're not maybe mentally or emotionally prepared for the rejection that also comes with that, because there isn't that genuine sincere relationship partnership. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because what you described to me is like you were able to really leverage this long litany of people that you had met along the path who saw something in you, believed in you, and have been willing to give you a hand up. And in return, you have now helped other people by giving them a hand up as well. That's a much different environment than I think young people are maybe living in today, because I don't think many of them have gained the advantage yet of developing those partnerships and relationships.
Such an interesting dynamic to explore, Linda, truly. Between 2011 and 2017, what was it, 1,200 people died from taking selfies. That's a form of death that did not literally
Right. How
exist a
crazy
decade
is that,
ago.
right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
I did not know that stat.
yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
fascinating, and I'm somewhere in the ballpark. It's like 1,200 something, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
you know,
Still.
What?
still, it's kind of mind boggling. It's what can you do for the shares, what can you do for the likes, right? But it's also comparing somebody's highlight reel to your background program, and it's an unfair comparison when you're looking at these things, right? And so I'll say that I learned this lesson prior to social media really becoming important, and then applied it to social media going forward. The only platform that I truly engage on a regular basis is LinkedIn
Yeah.
for professional purposes, because I have a message that I try to share there, and
Yep.
that's how I cultivate my business relationships and provide the wisdom that I have to share.
Absolutely.
Um, Instagram, I use that as well, but I use it because I'm a photographer and I like sharing pretty pictures of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just it.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
like pretty pictures, that's what I put out there. And I'm not doing it for anything. I don't care about the likes. I just want to have a catalog of the beautiful things I've seen in the world
Yes.
so that my family and friends can see those beautiful things as well. It's not bragging.
Mm-mm.
I don't do it for any of that
No.
stuff. That's not what I'm doing it for. For me, my memory is terrible, and photographs are the way that I remember important moments in my life.
Yes.
So
Me too.
that's my way of sharing it, if you will. But in this space, the lesson I actually learned prior to that, which applies, I think, very well to the social media framework, was when I left the city of Colorado Springs. Mind you, this is post dying, and I
Yeah.
was, I'll say, an important person in town. Most people knew who I was. I was very well recognized around town, and most people like to say that they knew me.
Sure. Yep.
So they like to say that they knew me, right? And in my going away party, 400 people showed up to it. So it was a massive event. And then there was the next day when I wasn't important anymore.
Right.
I didn't have public works director as my title. I wasn't the chief innovation officer. I didn't have value to others in the way that they wanted me to have value. And I learned that there's these different circles that sort of exist. There's this space of people who are happy to know of you and have some link or tie to you, but they don't really have any vested interest in your success. They have a vested interest in saying that they know you, and that's about it.
Yeah.
I'm connected with Linda. Oh, are you connected with Linda? Yeah, I follow her, those kinds of things. And so
Right.
there was this outer circle, if you will. And then there was a circle that was sort of inside of that, where it was people who had a genuine interest or you genuinely impacted their lives.
Right.
And that was a different circle. And then there was this core group of people who were, hey man, what's next for you? Can I help you with anything? They were actively seeking me out to help me on what was next. So there was like these three layers of sort of like, I like the idea of Nick.
Yeah.
I put him on a pedestal. And guess what? When I didn't have value to them, they disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what we do in this culture as well, is we love a hero up and until they become a villain.
Yes.
And we love that story, don't we?
Yes, we
So
do.
it's like your
Yeah.
influencing ability is up and until you mess up, in which case everybody's happy to pile on. And that larger circle has no interest in your long-term success or happiness, quite frankly. When you go down to that next circle, yeah, there's probably some level of interest in your success and happiness. And then there's this closer circle of folks that are, genuine personal relationships that have an interest in helping you be the best you that you possibly can. And those are the people
Yeah.
that will show up for you no matter what.
Yeah.
And they're the partners. They're the people who have shown up for me consistently through my life when I had nothing to offer them except me.
I love that.
Right.
Gosh, that was really powerful, Nick. And I think that really summed things up nicely. Don't you think, Scott? I mean, I just think
100%.
like just what a great way to think about relationships and partnerships in those three circles. And I really liked that a lot.
Yeah, and it's important for people. It's nice of you to share it for our group too, because that's what people need to start to recognize is, the level of relationship that they're in doesn't create value for themselves. They need to be able to recognize how to put that in the system. And I've got 3 young kids that are using Instagram and social media and all that. And it's a constant battle of, you don't know half those people, but because you're all doing it, they're not your friends, and teaching that balance is really, you put that together nicely. Thank you for that.
Nick, thinking about what Life 2.0 for you for sure, I'm guessing that you have probably also instituted a lot of various kind of goals and habits and self-care that you probably focus on, if for no other reason than health. But I'm guessing that a lot of that factors in. But talk a little bit about your morning routine, because I know that you have something special that you do around kind of sunsets and sunrises as well. So maybe talk a little bit about what does a morning routine for Nick look like?
To the extent that one exists with a 5-year-old, I'll say,
Yes, I'm well
um,
outside of those. You met my baby, so yeah, I'm well outside of that time frame. So
I'll say this. One of the things I love to do, and I've been doing this since 2014, was watch 300 sunrises or sunsets a year. And that's something I've been doing since 2014. This last year, I actually wasn't able to do it, unfortunately. But every other year, I've managed to do it. And for me, what I've learned is the sunrise is about hope, hope for a new day. No matter how dark the night was, you can decide whatever you want today to be. And if you put your head there, that's what I see when I see the sunrise, is I just see the choice of hope in this day and what I want it to be and how I intend to show up today. And just allow that for 5 minutes to fill my heart up. And then I'm able to go ahead and wash away whatever the night would bring, if you will. Because it can get dark, especially when you're in a hard place or in a depressed place.
Mm.
Nights can be very difficult.
yeah,
And so the sunrise is that moment of hope. And then sunsets, of course, also as well. And that's a moment of reflection through the day where we allow the good, the bad, and the ugly to kind of wash over us. We allow the hard things to have their moments, but also the celebrations that we weren't able to have because we just had to do the next thing.
Right.
And there's so many great moments in our lives that we don't get to celebrate with ourselves. And it's like this massive accomplishment. You spent months working on it, and everybody's like, "Hey, great job, Scott. Thanks for doing that." And then on to the next.
Right.
And it meant something more to you. And you
Sure.
got to take those moments to let that happen too. But the hard moments, I find you don't have to carry it around as baggage anymore
Yeah.
if you take that time every day
yeah,
and just let the hard things have their moments, because that's life.
right.
That's it. That's part of the human condition and experience. And so for me, sunrises in the morning are a big part of my routine. Now it is the 5:30 to 6 a.m. wake up call with the 5-year-old who comes out with me and has come out with me many times. We watch the sunrise together. He used to come out with me when I would photograph it, and we'd go to the lakes and photograph it in the morning, and
Oh,
he'd come along for the ride. So I try and do that. And then the rest of the morning involves something with coffee.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. We
Well, I
all
was
need that coffee for sure.
and I was wondering if we can go to your Instagram page and see all these great sunrises and sunsets. So it sounds like we can. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
I'd like to expand on just one other thing you noted in there, and there's truth to that. When someone's going through something difficult, one of the things that I've learned, in my brother's passing, was fighting the grief of that or letting it matriculate in are two very different approaches, and fighting it is much, much harder. So letting it matriculate in and taking that time and honing in on that experience, I wanted to expand a little bit for our listeners, because that's really something I didn't learn I'm a 53-year-old man with 3 kids, and I've been through a lot. I've got companies, and but when you really hit home with someone you're close with, or a death or something super serious like that, I had no idea letting it matriculate in is part of the process, to your point. And spending those 5 minutes every morning and every day is exactly what I did when I realized I needed to make that part of the new you, right?
Yeah.
And so you sharing that and me expanding on that is exactly why we're together today, because I think it's really important for someone to maybe hear that and pay attention to that before they have to, which is where I was a few years ago, which is probably where you were when you figured it out too. But I really appreciate you saying that, and I did want to expand on that. But yeah, I can't wait to go to your Instagram page and see some of these sunrises and sunsets. And see, social media has value.
That's right.
It does in the space of that, and I'll say that,
Yeah.
thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that one. I love the word articulate, which never gets used very often, and I appreciate you using it.
Yeah.
But to your point though, too, it is okay for us to have these moments, and we don't give ourselves the permission to do that. And that's not
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
We're taught that that's not okay, that you should bury it or hold on to it, or, and now it's become, I'll say, more socially acceptable to do this, I'm not okay is
Mental
okay.
health. Yeah.
And it's there now. Like culturally, we're having a moment, an awakening of this sort of thing. But that doesn't help us either,
Mm-mm.
necessarily. The fact that when somebody says that, that's great, but it still doesn't end my pain.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And the part that I feel with grief is also, the beauty and the joy that I appreciated their life.
Yes.
And that's not a bad thing. That's just a heart thing. And if you give it that, you know, then you can actually enjoy and experience those things as well about the people that you've loved and lost, and even just the hard things in your day.
Yeah.
We don't give ourselves
Right.
permission to just have bad feelings.
Yes. It's so
You know?
true.
Embrace the things that are keeping you up at night will allow you to sleep through them the next.
Right.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think too, what's important is a balance and all that too, right? Because I think
Mhm.
that what has happened with us becoming, and I'm so glad we are becoming more widely accepting of mental health and that it exists, and dealing with grief and hard things is a real thing that we do need to do. I mean, I certainly grew up in the generation with parents where we did not talk about things and we swept everything out of the garbage. Everything was good. And you certainly did not talk to therapists or even strangers about anything that was happening in your family. However, I also think, though, that by the level of acceptance, we have to find where is the middle ground in all of this, because I also think that what is happening is that because we have such a much more accepted perspective of these things, it allows us sometimes to wallow in that area as well, and in almost becomes the excuse then for why we can't move forward. And life is hard, and I have all of these things. There's got to be the balance between the two, right? So I think the level of acceptance and being able to talk about things is so critical. But then there's the other side of that, is then how do I move on from that? And I think that again is where some of our well, really all generations. I don't want to pick on the younger generation, but I do think that we've seen such an increase in suicide over the last several years. And having had several of those in my own family, I can really appreciate the fact that if you don't have a path forward, then you can get to a place where you just feel hopeless. And so, what I love about this is that it's like, how do we find the balance in all of this, and look for that path forward? So things like sunsets and sunrises help us, right? Because they're things that help us process and move things forward as well. So
Fine.
And it's a limited time engagement. I do 5 minutes in the morning,
Right.
5 minutes in the evening. That's it.
yeah,
But that's usually enough to deal with whatever the daily stuff
yes,
that continues to pile
Mhm.
on. I mean, again, larger grief, can manifest itself in lots of different ways. But I agree
absolutely,
with you, Linda. Embrace the suck. The water's warm.
yes,
Now let's go do some stuff
yes,
and make our lives awesome. Like,
absolutely,
because that's the way to go
And,
about it.
and,
Like,
and what a great
yeah,
segue into the self-care part of the question she asked, right? I mean, imagine you're physically fit. Imagine you're in a place where you're exercising and clearing your head and getting the endorphins going. And for me, I call that peak performance. So then if you're doing that, and I'm going to ask you, Nick, exactly what you're doing next, but if you're doing those activities and you're adding the sunsets, and that's really helping you get to a place where you're then working in peak performance around the moving forward we're starting to talk about, right? So
yeah,
do you have a peak performance plan for yourself? Like I work out every morning, 6 o'clock. You'll find me at the gym, and that really clears my head. And it's right after the sunset, or it's during the sunset, that I'm out on my run, you know? So I'm wondering what you're doing every day or every other day, if anything.
yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly active. I'll say
Yeah.
that. For me, fitness is about being able to do the activities I love as long as I want to do
Yeah.
them.
yeah,
That's how I look at the
I like
fitness
that.
routine that I engage in. So sometimes I'm lifting weights and
Yeah.
running and jumping rope, but predominantly I'm a very active disc golfer.
Okay.
And I'm a skier. So, for example,
Nice.
this last Monday, I took Monday off and I skied half the day,
Awesome.
ate barbecue,
Perfect.
and then went and played disc golf on a mountain disc golf course for half the day.
How awesome
But
That's
is
a
that,
day of all
right?
days right
Only in
there.
Colorado can you do that too.
that's a Colorado day.
That's right. That's a
Awesome.
Colorado day.
Yeah.
But for me, I love playing disc golf. I'll play that 3 to 4 times a week. I
Awesome.
do not care what the weather looks like. I'm all weather, and that's part of it as well. But during the summer, I have been hiking the 14ers, which are the 14,000-foot mountains in Colorado,
Yeah.
which is it engages both not only the physical part of you, but the mental part of
Right.
you as
Yes.
well.
Right.
And the beauty is just staggering. I mean, wildflowers, animals you would never see unless you have the courage to go hike a mountain in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere. Um, so it engages all of me because
Perfect.
every time I come down from a peak, I learn a lesson.
That's
That
awesome.
usually I'll reflect on in the next day in a LinkedIn post or something like that, or
Yeah.
post a bunch of photos from. But those are the ways that I sort of keep
Y-
myself
Yeah.
engaged. And when I don't do those things, Scott, to your point, when I disengage with those activities, or I'm not doing that, I'm not my best. I don't feel my best. I don't act my best.
Right.
So I'm very conscious about making that,
Yeah.
and my wife's very supportive in that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Making that part of the routine.
Yeah.
Mine is too.
You
I
gotta
get
be.
that.
Yeah. No, that's important. Having that again, that goes back to just our whole conversation on partnerships and relationships. That you're not always going to like all the same stuff either, right? My
Right.
husband does not enjoy hiking, but I like to go on long walks, and so we can do those things separate. Like we don't have to do those things together, and he's very supportive of what I like to do, and similarly, he loves his cars, and so he likes to spend time doing that, and so it's all about balance, right? And I think that's kind of the message that we've had in this conversation. It's really about how do you find that balance. Nick, because you have such an interesting career now and what you're doing, what's one piece of advice that you would give someone who's like really kind of starting out in that type of a career? Because, what you've done is built this amazing consulting side where you're going in and you're talking to all these different organizations, a lot in government where change is very challenging in the first place. But you're doing that. What's one piece of advice? Like if I'm a young person and I'm like, wow, I really love what Nick does, how would I possibly get started with doing something like that?
Never be afraid to get fired.
I like that. I like
That'd be
that.
my starting condition, is never be afraid to get fired. This isn't my first venture. I was bankrupted at 27 from my first venture, and we had a $1 billion idea that's now incorporated in a lot of different softwares. And we got our lights sued out by patent trolls. And, when you're 28 years old and bankrupt and had a really successful idea, it feels like, you feel the massive weight of failure,
Yeah.
and, in government, there's all the incentives in the world to not do better
Yes.
and to not innovate, right? The system is stacked against you. And if I had listened to the people who wanted to tell me what I should do, I would never be where I
Yeah.
am. Leadership is not something that you're given. I don't believe that. I think that if you're a leader, you go lead, whether they want you to or not.
I like that. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So for me, I've got sort of this dragon energy. It's how I show up in the world or whatever. But it was also a space of like, you know what? Fire me. I'm good at what I do. I'll prove it to you. I'll generate results. I'll create effective teams. I'll build these cultures that you want. You just might not like how I do it. And I'm okay with that
Yeah.
because maybe I don't like how you do it either.
Yeah.
Like at no point was I ever sort of given over to the thought process that I am unequal to another.
I love
Yeah.
that.
And I think that's something that when you're younger, you're encouraged to do, right? Once you bide your
Yes.
time, just stay in your position, stay in your rank, do your work, put your head down and all that kind of stuff. Hey, there's some truth to that for sure.
Yeah.
You got to learn stuff. You got to
Yes.
have some wisdom
Yeah.
before you go out and act wise.
Right.
That's right.
So true.
Don't feel entitled. That's different,
Yeah.
than having the ability to learn new things and then not be daunted when others don't see the same things you see.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to others, man, life will be real boring.
Yes. Yes. I love that. That's a
And
great
maybe that's
piece of
not great advice for everybody, but that's how I look at it.
I love it. It's your
I probably should
advice.
temper that. Yeah,
Well, I love the dragon.
asterisk.
The dragon energy
Yeah.
thing I'm going to coin that because I relate to that too, Nick. And I think this whole entrepreneurial aspect of our personalities is 100% dragon energy, and those are the ones we're trying to tap into. To say also, in addition to the rest of the folks that we're trying to tap into, that you got to bide your time, but also bring that energy. It's yours
Yes.
it's yours, not theirs. I love
Absolutely.
it. I love it.
Me
It's
too.
awesome.
I'm big on, part of my success is generated from building pockets of positivity. I'm an inherently positive person.
Yeah.
And there's no shortage of times when I worked in government or in other jobs where people were like telling me about how bad their job was, how much their job sucked.
Right.
And by the way, how much I think my job, they thought my job should suck and how disappointed I should be. And it's like, no, you don't understand. I love what I do.
Yeah.
You do not have permission to rob that of me. I love what I do. If you don't love what you do, that sounds like your problem.
I
Right.
like that.
But I'm big on building these pockets of positivity. And then from there, your job is to go out and obliterate the energy vampires.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
The people who suck the joy out of life, you're my enemy. You're my target, by the way, too.
I love it.
Um,
I love it.
You no longer have free reign to ruin other people's lives because in our personal lives, we can walk away.
Yes. Yeah.
If somebody is an energy vampire, you can walk away from them. If they're trying to steal the joy from your life,
Yeah.
they may be in your family even, but you can still walk away.
Absolutely.
In work, it's the one place you can't.
Right.
Very true. Yes.
So I'm not going to let you own my culture. I'm going to tell you how the culture works with me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to invite others in. And when you give people a choice between positivity and negativity, they'll choose positivity. They just usually don't get a choice.
It's very
Right.
true. Yeah.
Gosh,
Yeah.
it's so valid. So valid.
So be that energy for them. To your point, Scott, like be that big personality, be that person who's fun, and not everybody's going to get it.
Yeah.
That's right.
But you're not universally popular. You're not pizza or chocolate, nor will you ever be.
Right.
No.
So
Yes.
just go out there and be that. You know what I mean? And
No, I
Yeah.
love that. Well, hey, Nick, we like to end our show with 3 questions. And so these are the 3 questions that we're going to pepper you with today. I'm going to use Scott's word pepper.
okay.
What are 3 books you'd recommend to our audience and why those 3?
Well,
I was just gonna say. I was just
Obviously,
gonna say
yes.
that.
So these are the softballs we were talking
That's
about.
it.
Well,
Exactly.
there's one over here you might want to talk about too.
That's right,
Just
that's right.
saying.
Hey, now this is Nick.
Please
This
refer
is
to
not the
Scott's
Scott
screen.
show.
The second book. Keeping it easy for me.
Thank you.
That's a tough one for me because this is one of those areas where I'm actually fairly fixed in what I like.
Okay.
So I like books because once I've read them, I know how they turn out, and it's one of the very few areas in my life where I really enjoy hearing the same story again and again.
I like that.
So for me, it's not about acquiring different knowledges. It's about feeling comfort, and this is my way to feel comfort. So I listen to the same books over and over again. So for me, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien fan.
Okay.
So I love the Tolkien
Yeah.
books. And I like that he created a completely fictional world that has such amazing, rich detail. And I find that to be fascinating. The
Yeah.
fact that he invented languages and entire places and entire species,
Yes.
gave them enough that it's not just a book, but it's, it's an entire mythology. So I really enjoy that, those books. Um, I enjoy the Harry Potter series as well. Mostly, I really like listening to them. I find it to be highly digestible. I understand, some of the friction and pushback from that, but I don't care. I like them.
That's
great.
okay. That's what I love about you is
So
that
those
you
are the
are who
ones,
you are. Yes.
Yeah,
No,
they're
those are
great.
that's perfect. That's exactly
Yeah.
it. So what are 3 podcasts that you're listening to these days? And would you recommend them and why?
I don't listen to podcasts.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Why not?
So this is a weird thing about my space too, which is to say that, one of the things I learned about my creative journey is that for me, I don't love being, and I don't know how to put this, but especially being on a podcast right now, whatever. But I
That's
guess
all right. That honesty is the
Emerging,
best way to be
emerging
here. Yes,
storytelling.
absolutely.
Call it that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. And I like that as a phrase better, actually, Scott. I really do.
Yeah.
Because, for me, what I find with this is people will say to me, "Oh, what you're saying is just like so and so." But I've never read so and so. I didn't think the way that so and so thought. I like to keep my thoughts original and unique
Yeah.
in my own mind.
I
And I
like
find that when I listen to podcasts, it starts to influence my ability to generate unique thought, which is important to me personally.
Yeah.
And I start to maybe take on the thought processes. And not that it's wrong, it
Yeah.
certainly is great for a lot of different reasons. But for what I do, it can be very detrimental when somebody's like, "Oh, well, what you're quoting that's a Brene Brown thing." No, it's not. It's a Nick Kittle thing. Brene Brown thought of it too. We just think about it differently.
I
Right.
like that.
So for me, that's what I find is my mind gets influenced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Valid.
it can be very positive. It also just deters me from my own original thought processes, which leads me to my own original conclusions. And
Yeah.
instead, I'll start to take in somebody else's thought process and start to adapt to that. And I don't like that for a variety of reasons, especially because I'm in the innovation space.
I love it.
It's probably a terrible answer, but
No,
Oh
it's
my
a good.
gosh, no, there are no. I think that's exactly what we're looking for, like, right? It's just what you said there is that that's the beauty of all of this is that we're not all the same, and we don't want we're not trying to create a groupthink environment, right? Because I agree with you. I struggle with those things as well, the whole self-help and the books and that. And I kind of glance through those sorts of things, and I'll take little nuggets of wisdom where I can find them. But similarly to you, I do find that what if I get too engrossed in it, I do find myself losing myself in it all. Like, do I really believe that, or do I believe it because, Jay Shetty, who is one of these guys who I really love listening to on meditation. Am I just feeling that way because Jay said I should feel that way? So no, I love your honesty. That's exactly what we're hoping for in this what we're doing here. So no.
I can't wait to fail on your third question, Linda. This is
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Like,
Let me
I
see.
failed on the
Well,
first
this
two
one,
pretty
this
hard.
one
Like,
at least
No,
puts
you
it
didn't.
back on you a little bit. On
Yeah, yeah.
what's the one question you wish that we'd asked you, and how would you have answered that question?
wow. I'd say, what's your life motto? And for me, it's live the life you love and love the life you live.
Like
And I had that on a Yaga T-shirt from 1994, and I just fell in love with it, and it really has been the embodying principle for how I've tried to live my entire existence.
Yeah.
And I remember that every single day.
Love it.
So
That's
yeah, that'd
fantastic.
probably be my thing. Is
All
what's
right.
mom?
Well, so you get one pass. So at least you answered one question in a really good way. So yeah, thank goodness. You saved the podcast right there.
I sweat through my clothes here. Like, this is, I'm gonna go take a shower. This is crazy.
Oh my gosh, this has been so fun, Nick.
Thank you,
I
Nick.
really,
Yeah.
I know Scott and I really enjoyed talking with you, and I got to know you even better. I've been following you for a long time, and following your journey, and just watching, and now I feel like I got to know who Nick Kittle really is, not just who I see on LinkedIn. And so I really appreciate you being on our show today.
Yeah,
for
and,
sure.
and I'll definitely reiterate that sentiment. I had no idea how much we had in common, and I really appreciate how you want to share that message. This is a platform we're experimenting with, that we're putting a series together for, and we hope that others will sort of plug into the idea that it's thought-provoking, not thought. We're not trying to tell people how to think. We're trying to create opportunities. So.
Yeah.
I think you've done a really nice job of sharing some of that information, and thank you very much for that. It's been fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
I really appreciate the honor of being here, and thank you, Linda. It's great to get to know you more, and Scott, great to get to know you as well. And honestly, I think the message and the platform that you're trying to put out here is really valuable to share with folks. And I'm excited to see what season 2 looks like, because I think you're onto something here that's big.
Oh,
Great. Thank
thanks
you
so much, Nick. We really appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed this episode of An Unconventional Guide to Success. If you want to learn more about Nick Kittle, you can follow him on LinkedIn. His profile is in the show notes. And to learn more about Sustainavation, or to ask Nick to keynote your next event, check out his website at www.sustainavation.us. An Unconventional Guide to Success is an inspirational, motivated series hosted by Scott Montgomery and Linda Misegadis, recorded on Riverside.fm. Music, editing, and production by Logan Misegadis. Check out Scott Montgomery's new book, How Did You Get Here, and all the helpful related materials at www.howdidyougethere.com. Thank you for joining us on our journey. If you would like to reach out to us, our contact information is in the show notes.